Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl on your face when you're sleeping.
Unclogging massive lake drain. Worst clog I have ever seen. You flush the toilet, you drain the sink, and you get back to your regular business. Life doesn't get any better than this. But have you ever wondered what would happen if your city or town's sewerage system suddenly failed? What a disaster that would be! Yes, sewage failures are one of the filthiest and most dangerous health hazards in the world. Take for example the sewage failure of 1858 in London. It was so bad, historians actually call it the Great Stink. Now that's funny. Oh, Londoners, you wish we'd forget that part of your history, right? That being said, you should probably put your gas mask on before proceeding with this video, because we'll be diving deep into the smelliest and most pungent draining failures in the world. We have to warn you though, our number one pick is quite sickening. Therefore, if you're eating anything right now, just push it to the side, unless you want to puke all over yourself. The Great Stink of 1858. Of course, we'd have to kick things off with the greatest and smelliest stink of the 19th century. Relax, we're not trying to pick a bone with London or anything, but let's call it as it is. This was a sewerage disaster of epic proportions. At the time, there was a massive influx of people from all over the world settling in London. Unfortunately, the city council's drainage infrastructure wasn't stable enough to handle the waste from the new settlers, and therefore, local cesspools began flowing freely into the River Thames. The waste from these cesspools began transmitting contagious diseases to the locals, and there were 3 outbreaks of cholera in the region. It was so bad that members of the British Parliament had to soak their curtains in chemicals to block off the repulsive smell. Enough was enough. The authorities called in a civil engineer by the name of Joseph Bazalgette to divert the waste eastwards into a number of interconnected sewers that sloped away from the central business district of the city. Construction of the northern and southern outfall sewers began in 1859 and was completed by 1875. It was Bazalgette's ingenious drainage and sewerage systems that ensured no more effluent would be dumped onto the shores of the River Thames, bringing an end to the pungent smell and the recurring cholera outbreaks. If anything, his actions saved more lives than any other Victorian official. In fact, they are still operational to this day. Sewage basin collapse, Gaza. During the mid-2000s, the Gaza Strip was the subject of controversy between Palestine and Israel, and this bitter struggle is what led to neglect and high levels of poverty in the area. Indeed, these struggles rippled down to locals when in March of 2007, the barriers holding a sewage pool exploded, gushing sewage water to the neighboring villages. The mixture of human and animal waste was so bad, it flooded as high as 2 meters. 5 people died and another 20 were injured in the disaster. Not to mention hundreds of homes were damaged in the process. The collapse highlighted the desperation and urgent need to improve the overburdened and underfunded infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. For several days, the noxious and repulsive smell of dead animals and human waste hung in the air. It was unbearable. Locals found their homes swallowed in the effluent. One house had it so bad that everything from the TV to the head of the door was covered in muck. Fearing that people had been buried in the raw sewage, Hamas gunmen and rescue crews rushed to the scene to search for survivors. They had to dress in wetsuits and paddle their boats through layers of foam and floating brown and green rivers of waste. Other rescue crew members had to wade through repulsive sewage that was high up to their hips. By the end of the day, the locals had lost everything, as if fate had planned to add salt to their already open wounds that had been aggravated by the war. In response, aid officials vowed to construct a larger waste treatment facility immediately, a project that had been stalled for years because of the perpetual fighting in the region. Ironically, there was an existing treatment plant in northern Gaza that was just a few hundred yards away from the area where the disaster occurred. If officials had acted early enough, the disaster could have been entirely averted. Sewage treatment plant failure, Edinburgh. In 2007, a pump failure occurred at the Seafield sewage treatment plant in Edinburgh, sending millions of liters of untreated waste and human excrement into a nearby Forth River estuary. What was even more shocking is that water officials took almost 2 days before notifying the public about the disaster. The failure occurred because of a ruthless cost-cutting exercise that had been carried out, as well as an asset-stripping operation that had been pushed by the new owners of the Thames Water Company. The company was unable to shut down its Seafield drainage and sewage plant because they had no alternative means of treating the sewage of more than 800,000 people living in the area. According to reports, there had been a massive failure in one of the large pumps at Seafield which pumped wastewater into the treatment works. In case of such failures, the plant had been built earlier to redirect the effluent into the nearby river. These old plans had not been updated. In turn, millions of gallons of excrement and wastewater was washed into the nearby estuary, where locals regularly went for a swim and bathed in the river. Thankfully, there were no local reports of residents getting sick or contracting any water-related diseases. One thing's for sure, the smell was pretty toxic around the river. Homes flooded in San Isidro and La Providencia, Mexico, 2011. One of the biggest causes of drainage and sewage failures is heavy rainfall. And this is what happened in La Providencia, Mexico, when in 2011, heavy rains overwhelmed the sewage system, causing it to fail. More than 200 homes were flooded in San Isidro with human excrement and wastewater. More than 6,000 cubic meters of raw sewage gushed out of the drain and flooded the surrounding area. Fortunately, no one lost their lives as a result of the failure. It was reported, however, that 3 children were injured in the process. While disasters such as these are far and few between, it would be quite troubling if your home was damaged by a sewage failure of this magnitude, right? Local man unclogging a massive lake drain. And now we've come to the best, or shall we say, worst pick of the day. As you can see, this local official is working hard to ensure a clogged drain is open. Clogged drains can be very hazardous if left unchecked during the rainy season. Such a flooded drain, especially one as stagnant as this, can be potentially dangerous. The water can be a breeding ground for all sorts of viruses and bacteria that can result in an outbreak in nearby residents. So, this Good Samaritan, or probably one of the local authorities, decided to put matters into his own hands. Armed with only a rake and one hell of a determined spirit, he goes about raking away the leaves clogging the drain. Half an hour later, the drain starts consuming the flooded water, causing a massive whirlpool that shows just how massive the flood caused by the clog was. An hour later, the pond is back to its original level, and we can clearly see water flowing freely through the drain. Not all heroes wear capes, and we should always thank our servicemen who go above and beyond to ensure our health is prioritized in urban areas. Before we continue, viewer discretion is advised. We are not responsible for any barfs, stomach upsets, or sudden appetite losses. Sewage diving after drain failure. What's the worst job in the world? Well, if you thought your office job sucked, then you have no idea what some people go through. Have you ever wondered how sewage blockages are emptied? No, there's no machinery involved. Someone has to physically go down there and unclog all the wastewater and human excrement. As you can see, this sewage diver has to wear a protective suit to do this dirty job. He dives into the wastewater and begins rotating his arm and all the filth and effluent. We can only imagine how bad the smell is. Even if he is wearing a mask, can he even breathe? After a few minutes of wading in the wastewater and thrashing about in it, he finally manages to unclog the filthy drain. It takes him more than half an hour to rid his suit of all the wastewater, not to mention clean the area where he washed at. Yep, being a sewage diver is one of the most daring jobs in the world. Not only does it take a considerable amount to carry out, but you have to have a nose made of steel. And to think that some of them don't even wear masks when they dive down into these stink holes. Yet again, we see another diver, this time entering a manhole to clear a wastewater drain block. Judging from how narrow this manhole is, it seems like one of the requirements of a sewage diver is that you've got to be in great shape. So, the next time you think you're having a bad day at work, just remember that there is someone out there who has to dig through hundreds of feet of human waste just so you can flush your toilet normally. Yeesh. With that being said, we've come to the end of the tunnel. Quite literally. Did we ruin your breakfast, lunch, or dinner? Let us know if you survived that daring challenge in the comments section down below. Want more videos that will probably still exist until the end of time? Click on any of the videos you see on the screen. As always, thanks for watching.